Onur, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Omar.
Do you have a favorite quote, something that inspires or motivates you that you can share with us?
I do actually, and we can do a full podcast about just this quote. You are not a drop in the ocean, you are the entire ocean in a drop. So this is a quote by Rumi, a 13th century Persian mystic. The way I interpret this for business is wisdom, purpose, and clarity. They are not out there. They are within you, right? So I think we have to look more within ourselves.
I love those deep quotes. You're right. We could talk about that for hours. Probably not as intelligently as Rumi, but All right. So tell us about Countly. What does the product do? Who's it for? And what's the main problem you're helping to solve?
So Countly is a privacy-first digital analytics and customer experience platform. So we help companies capture, analyze, and act on first-party data across mobile, web, desktop, connected devices without relying on third-party tracking or giving up the control of their data. Right. I guess the biggest differentiator would be the focus on privacy. Right. So we have been privacy focused since the beginning, 12 years ago. And the way we see it is in order for the companies to really not only value the privacy of their users, but the importance of data is accelerating even further with the introduction of AI and everything else. Right? So we want companies to own that data, not give it away to third parties or risk losing the data being stuck in those third-party platforms.
And give us a sense of some of the customers that you have. I know you've got some major brands using Countly.
Yeah, of course. So Countly has 3 editions, Omar. So we actually have an open source version, Countly Lite. We have a self-serve SaaS version called Countly Flex, and we have our flagship product, Countly Enterprise. So throughout the ecosystem, we are serving thousands of small and big companies. But I guess on the Countly Enterprise side, we have some great names. For example, BMW, Coca-Cola, AWS, Roche. Like we have worked with really large organizations throughout the history of the company.
And give us a sense of the size of the business. Where are you in terms of revenue, size of team?
So we are a 40-person team. So we are from 12 countries at the moment. So we are a 7-figure ARR business. We are fully bootstrapped. Didn't raise any VC money so far, and not really thinking of doing so going further. Yeah.
Great. So the business was founded 2013. Where did the idea come from? What were you doing at the time?
Actually, I was working in Huawei, and I was working not with my co-founders, but we got connected somehow, and there was this idea of building a self-hosted mobile analytics platform. So we were working in large companies, right? So I guess it was apparent the privacy aspect of data being exploited too much, and we couldn't wrap our heads around, okay, how do companies agree to giving away their data to these large companies, to these third parties? This can't be the future, right? So the future should be like these companies should own the data. And that's actually the core reason why we started Countly, and why we still believe in the same thing, right? So companies should own their own data.
Okay, so you got the idea. You see that there's a potential opportunity, but how did you go out and validate the idea? Did you start kind of building something internally at the time, or was this more about let's do some market research and let's figure out if this really is a valid concern?
I guess we just jumped into it, Omar, right? So there wasn't much of a validation, right? So we loved the idea. Okay, let's just build this and see the reaction. I mean, of course, the Countly we are talking about 12 years ago, we are talking about like a very basic self-hostable analytics platform that just works for iOS and Android applications. That's it, right? I mean, pretty simple MVP, but it became quite popular actually. Back in the day, I mean, there is still SourceForge. I don't know, I'm sure you know the sites. I mean, we weren't using GitHub back in the day, or even Git for that reason. We were using SVN. The older ones in the audience will remember. But essentially, it became quite popular quite quickly. Right, we weren't really expecting that demand, and actually, we always had the plan of next to the open source version, we will have an enterprise edition. Without being able to do that, the first customers started asking for an enterprise edition with more features, support, hands-on, kind of dedicated teams for them. So I guess the market pulled the product from us in the very beginning. I mean, things aren't that easy right now, but 12 years ago, that was the story.
Okay, let's take a quick breather here. Are you struggling to bring your SaaS idea to life without a technical co-founder? Well, Gearheart is here to help. They're a product development studio founded by serial entrepreneurs. Acting as your fractional CTO, they've built over 70 successful products, including SmartSuite, which was named 2024 SaaS Startup of the Year. After selling his last company for $200 million, SmartSuite's founder turned to Gearheart to build his next big idea. Their Ukrainian-born team combines world-class expertise with Silicon Valley connections, helping you scale your product faster and smarter. Gearheart's leadership team even works directly with founders, offering deep insight into startup success. Book your free 1-hour strategy session with their leadership team before the end of May at gearheart.io. That's gearheart.io. Okay, so you decided to build this open source version and just put it out there. How long did it take you to ship something and get it in the hands of potential users? And once it was out there, how long did it take for these enterprise type requirements to start showing up?
I guess from idea to shipping the first version, I think somewhere like 6 months or so, like the very first like MVP type of version. I think it took like 6 months or so. But the enterprise version probably took another 6 months, right? So in a year, we had an open source version. I mean, there wasn't much of a difference between open source and enterprise, actually. Enterprise had just like one additional feature and support on top of the open source edition of currently. Yeah.
And were you guys still working full time? Was this like evenings and weekends thing, or did you once you started building it, you decided, hey, there's enterprise opportunity, let's jump in and go full time?
In the very beginning, it started as a weekends and after work sort of thing for a little bit, right? But then I immediately jumped into it. So I quit my job. I had a little bit of money, so I'm very young. Like there's nothing to lose really. Let me just try this out. If it doesn't work, like I will just go back to my corporate job for that matter. So my co-founders had a little bit more commitments than I did, so they didn't immediately quit their jobs. So they stayed a little bit, but still supporting me and everything. But yeah, like I guess chose to just jump into it immediately, given the age advantage back in the day, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, great. So putting the open source version out there on SourceForge, that was a great distribution platform at the time that, people are discovering this and everyone's kind of downloading it and starting to use it. How did the enterprise opportunity, because you said it was your intention to ultimately build an enterprise version of this anyway. That's what you had been thinking. But those enterprise customers started turning up. How did that happen, and who were some of those initial enterprise companies that you started having these discussions with?
Great question. So after launching the open source version, I guess we tried to do a little bit of like content marketing. I remember I had a blog post that I sent to Hacker News, and it got to the first page, and there was a lot of attention. It was about why I chose the technologies I chose, and not some other technologies back in the day, right? So talking about the getting out of comfort zone and trying, new stuff for your project. And I guess not only that, but also like the overall, we were pretty serious on writing proper documentation. We had, a blog, so to speak, so like that content area. So I guess all of that plus the open source perspective contributed to these large companies finding us themselves, right? So we didn't really go to any large company ourselves. We were lucky. I guess one of the first paid customers we had, paying customers was Intel, right? And they found us through the open source version, right? Because they had this developer platform, and they were looking to add analytics into that platform. They came like, okay, guys, this is great, but we need more features. We have like a enterprise version of this. We didn't actually at the time. So, we had the plan, right? So it was in the works, but the product wasn't really available. So I guess, the first 1, 2, 3 customers reached out themselves, and there wasn't even a product to sell yet.
So I'm curious because at that point the product wasn't doing a lot, right? Because you'd only been spending about 6 months part time building this, and for some of these larger companies to come along, I think there's often this tendency to just say, let's build this in house, right? We can do this ourselves. And so, why do you think that there was enough interest for them to reach out to you? And kind of work with you to get more features into this versus trying to just go off and build something in house?
I think, we sure had certain companies insisting to build in-house after having conversations with us, right? But I would say the smarter ones, because especially mobile analytics is very complicated, right? So unlike web, right? For web, you have a JavaScript SDK, and everything is JavaScript based, right? So it's not platform dependent. It's JavaScript. It's cross-platform. It works in every browser. But with mobile, for every platform, you need to have an SDK specifically created for that platform, right? So I guess the enterprises that know what they are doing, they kind of understood very well this challenge, right? So we can't possibly do an Android SDK and iOS SDK. Then like these other frameworks started to pop up, React Native, Flutter, there are a lot of different tools and platforms and frameworks to build these applications for. So I guess that was an early win for us. We were mobile first, right? So we had those SDKs ready. They were fully open source, by the way. They were MIT licensed. We wanted the companies to see what we are capable of under the hood, right? So, okay, just look at the SDK, what we've done, how we are maintaining it. It's fully transparent and, visible on GitHub. So yeah, I would say that was the biggest reason they would choose us versus build. Right. But yeah, I guess this is still a thing, Omar. After 12 years and us spending millions of dollars on building currently, we still get that reaction time to time. Why I can just build this myself? No one can. Doesn't matter the size of a company. If this is not your primary focus, there are too many individual bits and pieces that you don't know, right? So you cannot really know without fully focusing on analytics.
Now, you mentioned Intel being one of your first customers. On the one hand, that's amazing to be able to attract a customer like that. But as we know, when you're early stages of a startup, you're bootstrapped, you're a small team, having a big customer turn up with requirements can also become a nightmare very quickly. And so what happened with you guys and working with them?
That's exactly what happened, actually, Omar. They came in with high expectations, not just Intel, right? Probably all of the first 10 customers, they came with the same expectations, high expectations, broad customization demands, and a pace that didn't really match our scale, right? So at this point, we are talking about a team of 3, 4 max. Of course, we couldn't really say no, right? Because imagine like, okay, you took the risk of quitting your job, you have this software, and then Intel comes in saying, I want to pay you guys, right? So I didn't have that business mentality really. Like I'm a developer by background myself. So we couldn't say no, right? So we accepted most of those things. We didn't get paid enough. And now like thinking about, all the stuff we did for them. But I guess after the first 10 or so mistakes, let's put it that way, we learned to stand our ground, right? So holding firm to like a product vision, right? So if I'm obviously this doesn't mean we didn't listen to the customers, we listened to them, but there was a larger vision, and if what we are hearing doesn't really align in any way with that vision, we wouldn't do it. And we explained or tried to explain to the customers. And they understood, right? So I think that worked pretty well. And that's what we do right now, right? So still in enterprise business, customization is inevitable because in a way that's the value you bring to the table. Like Google Analytics will not change their product for you or add an additional feature for you most likely, but we can make that happen and suddenly you become very important for that company. We still do that, but again, not in the sense that I remember we used to do like, okay, we do analytics. Can you add push notifications? Sure. We are talking about like an entire, business, not a small feature, right? No, not anymore. Luckily.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard in the early days, right? Because you've got an opportunity, you want to delight those potential customers, you want to keep them around, and so it's tempting to say, okay, it's kind of deep down we know it's not on strategy, it's not part of the vision, but we could do it, right?
I mean, it's still not easy, Omar, I would say, right? So you have this big opportunity from this customer. You can't make this usable for other customers, and like still there is that perspective, I would say. But yeah, early on, I think everyone should be mindful of not overdoing it. I mean, sure, I'm not saying don't listen to your customers; they don't know, etc. Of course, they know the market, they know what they need, etc. But those early day stuff can kill the company early on, right? So we were lucky, I guess, from several angles, including not having VC money, right? Because certain things took us longer to build properly, and I can't imagine a VC sticking with us for like 3 years until we figured this out, and we had that time.
So at that point, you had the open source version, which people could download and self host. You
Mm-hmm.
had this enterprise version, which enterprises could, install in their own, behind their own firewalls or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
How long did it take for you to get to those first 10 customers? I assume they were all enterprise customers. And you mentioned that, hey, we did a lot of work for Intel and other people. And, in hindsight, we probably didn't get paid as much as we should have for the value we provided. What did you learn from that, and what did you do differently with the next few customers that came along?
I guess how long did it take? I mean, we are talking about 12 years ago. Omar, my my memory is a little bit not super clear, but I think I would say the first 10 might have actually took like 1 year to close, right? Because one problem with enterprise software is also the sales cycle, right? There's contracts to review, read. I mean, I guess we didn't even have a contract as far as I remember when Intel reached out, right? Like suddenly there's panic. Okay, let's find a lawyer, prepare a contract. How can we afford the lawyer? No money, like, okay, figure something out, etc. So we also delayed, like we weren't ready for that sales cycle to begin with, but also, of course, large companies have their own processes, had to go through all of them. So I think a fair estimate would be a full year to close the first 10. So I think what we have learned from the first 10 is definitely that expectation management and charging for not only the software, right? So I guess that's the biggest learning for me. So I mean, as a developer, like a technical person, I guess there is this tendency to think about what you're selling is just the product, right? Just the software. But in these kind of enterprise contexts, you are selling the know-how, experience, and the contributions you are making to the strategy of the company on the other side, right? In some occasions, this is actually more valuable than the software you are selling. Right? So I think companies like Intel made us realize this a little bit better. So that's why we still to this day, we don't have public pricing for enterprise edition. And the reason is we want to understand the situation as much as possible, right? How much help do you need from us? Do we need to be there hand holding you? Or you already have an analytics culture, you know what to do, and what you're after is just the software, right? There's a big difference between the two. So I think that's what we had to learn early on, because if we continued like that, we would be probably dead in a few months. Like, okay, there's not enough money. This is not really, I mean, great, of course, working with Intel and the likes of Intel. But at the end of the day, this needs to grow and expand into other stuff. And yeah, that's how we evolved, or what we learned at the end of the day.
And were these first 10 customers all inbound? Was it just from a combination of either discovering the open source or by coming across the content that you were publishing, like the Hacker News example you gave?
Yeah, exactly, Omar. To this day, I guess, we will probably talk about this later on. I don't think we are great at outbound still. So inbound, I guess that stuck with us. Like, okay, we are inbound, we are organic. Of course, being bootstrapped has its limitations and certain way of thinking. Like 12 years is a very long duration, so we had to really internalize the idea of whatever we do needs to be having an ROI like immediately. Like, we don't have 2 years to collect the results of a marketing campaign or a cold outreach. So I guess we had our mistakes, of course, in terms of outbound, but inbound was the primary thing then and even now.
And the content stuff, the Hacker News example was one, the blog post that you mentioned. I know you were writing content, publishing content, and just sharing what you were learning. When I talk to founders who are in those early stages, one of the things they often struggle with is they don't know what to write about. They don't think it's particularly useful, so they're like, why bother? And often it almost feels like there's some overthinking about who am I trying to write to? Who's the buyer? How do I reach them? All of this stuff. And you can almost get a lot of analysis paralysis and end up doing nothing. And it sounded like you were taking a slightly more simplified approach, which was, let's just share what we're learning along the way, and hopefully somebody will find it useful. Am I oversimplifying that, or was there some more thought about target audience and that stuff?
Definitely, Omar. So I think, yes, we weren't really overthinking about it, right? So, but if I started now, I would also maybe go into that overthinking route. Right now, like social media and everything is a different game than compared to like 12 years ago. So we should always keep that in mind. But even now, like, I mean, okay, like I also go into this time to time, like, should I share things on LinkedIn? How frequently? Like, whatever. Just don't think about it, right? So like, you know something, maybe everyone knows about it, doesn't matter, just go at it, share it, write an article. I mean, don't make AI write your blog posts, or just write as much as you can with what you know. That's pretty much what we did. I mean, I was what, 20 something years old at the time. I didn't really know much, right? So I only had like 3 years of prior work experience. And the first thing we wrote was actually a proper documentation, right? Just talking about the product, not like technically as in, okay, this is what this drop down does, but rather, if you are a product person, this is how you can use this feature for. Like, our documentation was very broad, not only covering, okay, these are the API endpoints or the UI, and here is an explanation of the UI, but rather if you come to Countly and see the dashboards, what can you do here? How can it be useful for you? Basically, we wrote about everything we can think of. And then the blog, the one I mentioned about Hacker News, I'm not a particularly, especially at the time, I wasn't any sort of expert in any of those technologies. But the point of the post was getting out of your comfort zone, right? I was a C++ programmer back in the day, and Countly was built on Node.js and MongoDB. And before that, I guess I tried Python and some other stuff. And I wrote about like, okay, I'm not comfortable with any of those stuff, but it's okay, right? So that was the post, right? So there is almost always a unique aspect of these founder stories. You face something, there's an obstacle, right? There is something unique to you for sure, right? So don't try to be like those bigger influencers, I guess, is a good way to think about it. You don't need to be famous from day 1, 2, 3. I mean, at some, maybe a few months, maybe a few years, no one will care about you. But at some point, if you're doing the right stuff, yeah, people will notice what you do. So I think that should be the thinking. But it's not, I guess it's easier said than done, sort of.
I think a useful tip that I came across was that when people are reluctant to write because they don't feel like they're an expert, is maybe just reframe it and think about, if you were writing for yourself 1 year ago, what do you wish you could teach yourself, right? What's the thing that might help you, right? That's probably useful enough, right? Without feeling like you have to come across like an expert.
Definitely. I mean, with that thinking, I shouldn't be here in your podcast, right? So you had guests that had built like unicorns, right? Why am I speaking with you? Because like I have unique angles to share that probably they didn't, face, or maybe it will be useful to a specific person in the audience. Same with writing. I just share whatever you can.
Yeah, totally. Now, you also now have this. You mentioned this SaaS version of the product, the Flex version of Countly, and you've been working on that for a couple of years now. You tried to build a SaaS version before, and that failed originally. Can you talk about that? Like, what happened? Why did it not work out the first time?
Yeah, of course, of course. So actually, the first time was very close to like I now question that decision, but after launching Enterprise Edition, like a couple of months later, we launched the SaaS version too, right? So we didn't wait like, okay, SaaS like won't be a thing, but rather we just wanted to go full in, right? So Enterprise open source and then SaaS version. The problem was, first of all, small team and distraction, right? So that's the biggest problem because here you have found a clear angle that's going to like product market fit direction very rapidly, which is like the enterprise and open source combo. In the SaaS area, especially because we are talking about a privacy centric solution, we didn't really differentiate enough, right? So what is the difference of Countly from Mixpanel, from Google Analytics? Nothing, right? So it's a shared environment. It's a shared SaaS service. There is no separation of data. There is no security feature other than the normal security stuff everyone does, like encryption and all that. So basically, it quickly turned into. I mean, it started making money, right? So that part, I mean, not a huge amount, but we immediately had paying customers very quickly. It got to a certain point, but then it couldn't pass that point, right? So we were stuck at some MRR, and it never really went above that number. And the reason I think is, again, we were the small player in the market. We didn't really fully put much thought into building Countly Cloud. It was called Countly Cloud back in the day, by the way.
Creative name.
Creative, yeah, exactly. So we decided like, okay, this is not really aligned with this privacy perspective we are trying to pursue, and it, we can't really differentiate, continuing with the cloud version right now. So we killed it at that point to focus fully on enterprise and open source combination.
Got it.
And why we did it again, maybe I can also talk about that, Omar. So we wanted to do it again, right? Because with enterprise edition, there is always the problem of that kind of business model only works well if you are dealing with large. I mean, the customer doesn't need to be large per se, but the contract value needs to be large, right? Because we don't have thousands of enterprise customers, right? So it will be in hundreds for any player in the market. But because of all the after sales interaction, right? Because of the way how closely you are supposed to work with the customer, it's on purpose built that way, right? So this will be a limited operation. But at the same time, Countly is a pretty capable product, especially now, right? Maybe not 12 years ago, but now you have analytics, we have engagement capabilities, like you can show surveys or send push notifications, and all of this is in a single platform, right? So this is super valuable even for small companies. So we were like, okay, we need to be able to give this to smaller organizations, right? So you don't need to be like a Fortune 500 to make use of these features, but at the same time we wanted to preserve our privacy perspective. Thus, this time we did it differently. So Flex is not like a traditional SaaS where it's like a shared environment and everyone is using that shared singular database, but rather just like a cloud provider. When you go into Flex, you create your own Countly server, right? So it's still a dedicated server. You choose the location, right? So, okay, I want a server in Germany, Frankfurt, and we launch your server there, and you start using your server that's dedicated only to you, right? So we basically preserved the story, right? So this is still about privacy. We still want you to own your data and keep it in a location or region you want, etc. So that's why we wanted to go and try it again, right? Because we know clearly SaaS is a booming market, and we don't have anything there in that market. So we wanted to basically make Count available for a larger audience, especially preserving our core values of privacy, being data ownership centric, etc.
So it's not a true sort of multi-tenant type SaaS, but you're basically making it easier for people to self-host, right? Because you're saying, the Flex version, rather than you taking the code and figuring all that stuff out, it's almost like being able to go to like a DigitalOcean and just do a one click and it spins up something for you.
Yeah, exactly. DigitalOcean was a big inspiration actually, right? So the way how it's easy to launch a droplet and get started with WordPress, whatever. I guess same idea. I mean, we could have launched, I guess, in these marketplaces of cloud providers, but then we wanted to have a little bit more control over the whole setup. So it's not just a singular solution you launch, but rather there are a lot of things you can do within the Flex ecosystem itself.
Now, I've seen other analytics products out there that also talk about privacy, but they when they're talking about privacy, it's from like a different perspective, like, we're not going to use your data, or like Google might be using it with Google Analytics. But when you talk about privacy, you're like being hardcore. You're just saying, hey, it's going to be a completely dedicated environment. It's your data, you control it, and so on. And so when you talked about doing this the first time and not being able to have a clear differentiator versus some of these other products that were out there, was this the one thing that you decide to get behind, and did it resonate with the market? Like, was it a matter of just doubling down on privacy and creating that differentiator for the product this time?
The topic of privacy, Omar, is an interesting one, right? Because on one hand, no one seems to care about it unless Google, Facebook, whatever does an oopsie about losing customer data. But most of the, at least back in the day, right, 12 years ago, it was super different than how it is right now. It was like, okay, privacy, like, sure, like, I don't really care, but tell me. But now it's mostly regulation driven thinking, I would say. Right? There are all these things like, GDPR in Europe, California Privacy Act, like there are multiple different versions of this within the US in different states. Then like Middle East, has its own regulation. Then, Turkey introduces a similar thing. Then China. So this quickly spread, and it's a regulation driven thing. But I think especially in the last few years, the value is even more understood, right? Because for a topic like AI, right? So I guess we owe that to AI. You need enormous amounts of structured data, right? So, because AI is not magic, right? So it needs to be trained. You need to have proper data for your internal, external, whatever AI applications you're trying to develop. So I think apart from data privacy, the ownership became the important aspect, right? So, I guess this goes hands in hand. The ownership, like me having direct access to my raw data or keeping it close to my AI model, so that I can just feed whatever information comes into my model immediately in real time, or instead of trying to use the API of Google Analytics to fetch the data and then get limited by bandwidth, and not only that, but also the depth of information that you can collect in a tool like Google Analytics is pretty limited compared to not only us but the wider product analytics market. So I think the demand for quality data really made the data ownership concept more and more important, and as a side effect, I guess customers or end users, they get to enjoy the privacy aspect. I can't really say like customers or large companies care about privacy and that's why they self-deploy. It has to be something in it for them, right? And that topic is right now data ownership, right? So having direct access, unlimited access, and control over the data.
I want to talk about um, founders or co-founders. You mentioned your two co-founders, and so in the early days, very early days, there was like three of you. But once the dust settled, and as you grew the business, it really was really just two of you who kind of ran the business together and grew it. Um, and then we were talking earlier about a dispute between the two of you that almost killed the company. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So I guess for us, as the business grew, right? So I guess this is quite common in every company, co-founder disputes, etc. But for us, there's an added dimension. Currently is quite an old business, right? 12 years, that's not a very common thing to see it. Okay, 12-year-old startup, and we are still calling ourselves a startup. So I think over those years, I never believed in people when they told me like, okay, co-founder relationship is like a marriage. Be careful who you start the company with. Not like be careful like that's a bad person, but rather you need to be really compatible with each other, right? Beyond what you initially imagine. So it's not just about like, okay, I know technical side, this guy knows sales side, we will be a great team. Not really. It doesn't work that way, right? You need to be compatible in a personality manner as well, right? So the vision, I mean, that compatibility is, I think, the most important thing in the long run, especially after like 5 years, things start to get a little bit different, right? So you have been together forever, it feels like forever, and you start to notice or pick up onto like these individual things you notice on the other side, sort of thing. So I guess ultimately we started having different visions for the company and for ourselves. So this misalignment started to affect execution, decision making, like this tension, started becoming visible across the larger team, which is something, you would want as the last thing to happen, right? Because people look up to you, like you are the founders of the company and you're fighting with each other. So that doesn't really work out. So yeah, I mean, at some point, I wish we handled the situation, I guess, cleanly. It didn't end up clean, unfortunately. You know, yeah, that unfortunately, like we broke up, and I remained in the company. Of course, I'm not talking about like he's kicked out, didn't get anything, etc. So of course there was compensation and everything. But I wish I could have kept a relationship, right? So I guess if I look back and question, okay, how could I have kept the relationship? I think we waited too much to address the apparent issues, right? So we always thought like, okay, let's focus on building the product, the business, but we didn't really build our relationship. We just, put under the rug all the problems, and then after a very long period of time, those things come up, right? And at that point, we still tried to fix, but unfortunately, it was too late to go back to where we were.
When you look back now, how long do you feel this was going on? It's like when you're kind of going through the process, you don't really sort of, maybe you have less awareness until it gets to a point where it gets really bad. And then maybe there's this 3-month period or 6-month period where things get intense. But when you look back, you go, honestly, there were signs of this like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that there was something that was not working, but we tried to kind of, as you said, like brush it under the carpet and just move on.
I think before the peak, I would say things started like 3-4 years ago. It already started to not be like the same relationship anymore, right? So I think, I mean, of course, we ignored the signs, but anything is a sign, right? So you have to remember, like, okay, how, like, you have to look into how are you really resolving the conflicts, for example. Are you really resolving them, or are you just like someone decides on the next step and you go with that person's decision and not talk about what the other person is thinking, right? So I guess we had many of those and like many other topics, of course. But yeah, I think this is definitely not like it immediately happened kind of topic, right? So I think the final stages are it doesn't take too long, right? So I would say for us it was maybe 6 months, 3 months, 3 to 6 months. But yeah, like there is a like 4-year history before those final moments.
If you were back in those days, in the early stages when you realized that there was some potential issue, or maybe somebody's listening to this who's in a similar situation right now, that maybe things aren't quite working with their co-founder or co-founders, and they're trying to ignore it. The outcome might still be the same, but if there was one thing maybe you could have done back then to at least get to a resolution or closure faster, is there anything that you would have done differently?
Definitely. I think I would have I mean, I was more I guess I was sugarcoating things more back in the day. I would say I sugarcoating as in, okay, I'm sure he didn't think that way, or I'm sure he didn't mean that, right? So basically, without speaking to the person, I made my conclusions in the most positive way, and that's how I continued essentially going forward. But I think I would recommend having those harder conversations as soon as you notice something is off, right? Don't wait for something to happen. That's already a very bad stage. Like I can tell you that breakup period probably took like 8 months from my time in terms of like emotionally not being able to work, right? And I don't know whether we will be able to actually solve the problem, right? So that could have killed the company, right? Because at that point, okay, no one really owns the company. What happens? So I think initially addressing that, it would have been better if we had those hard conversations, even like if we fought in those early signs of conflict or misalignment, it would have been a better result. Right? So I think basically have those crucial conversations very early on. Right? Don't wait for anything significant to happen. Would be what I would change. I guess I apply to that to everything right now. Right? So even with the people I work, I try to be, to the point and concise when it comes to those critical conversations, because this is the same with every relationship or like any team member you will have in the company. Don't wait until that significant one event. Just talk about the topic immediately.
There's probably a lot more we could unpack for the last 12 years of building this business, but I think this is probably a good point for us to wrap up. So let's get on to the lightning round. I've got 7 quickfire questions for you.
Sure.
All right. What's one of the best pieces of business advice you've received?
I still remember to this date, right? So a famous VC in San Francisco. So in the very beginning, we were speaking with some VCs to understand the market. He told me you have to do way more chest beating like a gorilla, right? So he talked me into like, okay, this is what we do in San Francisco, and that's one of the primary differences. Everyone here is a great marketer. They will talk about things that they don't even have yet, and they will sell it to you. And you have this great thing, but you don't talk about it enough. Was I think is it like a super unknown advice? Not really. It's a very obvious thing, but I still remember like the gorilla reference and like how it really captures the the way you should do it very properly.
Yeah, and I think especially for like maybe founders in Europe or other potential places where culturally it's not normal to do that kind of chest beating, right? But once you're in the US market, it's almost like you kind of almost come across as underselling yourself. So, what book would you recommend to our audience and why?
Yeah, I think I will recommend Deep Work by Cal Newport, Omar. Right? Not that I agree with every single word in the book, but I think focus is an aspect we are more and more forgetting. Right? So we are all over the place. We want to do everything now. Right? So we are not focusing on that one thing we should be really focusing about. And I think. I usually work that way, but that book kind of reminded me the importance of having like a mentality around, really dedicating time to do your deep work, meaningful work versus the everyday tasks. So, not a very, I guess, deep read, but I would still recommend to anyone in startup world, business, or creative work. I think they'll find something they can relate to.
Yeah, I totally get that. I think that's a great book, and also I found that my natural mode is to be kind of almost this ADHD mind, which tries to do like 100 things in a day, and the rare moments where I'm able to just say I'm going to focus on one thing in one day and just do something meaningful, it is so rewarding to be able to do that, but it's also a very hard switch to make mentally if you're not wired to be able to do that. This is definitely great advice. What's one attribute or characteristic in your mind of a successful founder?
I would say resilience, Omar. Right. So I guess it doesn't matter if you are the smartest person in the world, you have the best product, or you have the best team. It will get tough, right? It will then get better. Then it will get tougher. Then it will get even better. Right. So this is inevitable. Even if you're open AI, this is the story, right? So it doesn't matter if you're a small startup or like a super large company. So I would say this journey is nothing to be afraid of, right? So, and I would do it all again if if I was asked, okay, would you do it all again? But you need to be ready to embrace all the ups and downs, right? So remember, like I think, sure, there is like the okay, what's your exit strategy? And we can talk about that, but at the end of the day, exit is just one point, and like this is a full journey that you're going through, and it will have ups and downs, but you're doing it for the journey. You should be doing it for the journey, and to go through it you need to be really resilient. I think that will be my one pick.
What's your favorite personal productivity tool or habit?
I really don't have one, Omar, but I would say at least I try. Like for me, what works best is uh, even if it's small, I need to feel I accomplished something in that day, and I need to go to bed with that feeling and wake up with something I will target that day. Right. So basically, it's end to end, filled with some accomplishments and something to do that's meaningful. Right. So I try to keep at least like one thing for the next day, and I kind of that's my win for the day. As long as I have that back to back, I'm productive. Of course I can't do it all the time, right? So it is, it's not 100% schedule I can follow. The moment I don't have that anymore, especially if you are the founder of the company, like whether you will be dragged into all sorts of different places in the company with customer conversations and everything, and those feel like productive things, but I would say usually they aren't contributing anything, right? So you just feel productive because you stayed in a meeting for an hour with this random person.
What's a new or crazy business idea you'd love to pursue if you had the time?
I won't tell you exactly. I might still do it, but I think I had before currently. I had this idea for a game, right? And especially with the advancements in AI, that game would be super nice if done right now with the introduction of AI. So I guess that would be my project. I even drew like some pixel art for that game. By the way, it was that serious. I was almost doing it, and then currently happened. So yeah, that would be my pick.
I'll keep a lookout for it.
Yeah, I'll definitely let you know if I ever do that.
What's an interesting or fun fact about you that most people don't know?
Okay, so this I will hit you from a different angle for sure. So I think I have watched the entire Harry Potter series like 10 times. So I feel like that's like the movie series is like 8 movies, and like basically I watched like 80 Harry Potter movies in that calculation. So I feel like that's like a reset button. Like I love the concept. Like I just want to go back to that. Okay, we are starting again, like the whole story and everything. So yeah, I would say that's that's a fun fact.
That is a fun fact. And finally, what's one of your most important passions outside of your work?
I should mention my kids at this point, right? So because if I jump into other things, my wife might be listening, and of course my wife, right? So my wife and kids, not just kids, but I think if we go into like okay, like a hobby kind of angle, I'm really obsessed with mechanical wristwatches, especially lately. I would say I'm into those like for several years now, but I think it's mesmerizing to learn and explore all the inner workings of such complicated watches. And actually, when you think about it, they went through just like the tech business, right? So there was this introduction of the quartz movement, like the first battery powered movement, and suddenly these brands, they need to reimagine what they do, right? Because what they do is not unique anymore, or it's not like they can only do this masterpiece, but some cheap manufacturer just puts this movement into a watch, and it's more accurate than what you do as a 100-year-old watch brand, right? So basically they need to readjust. So I guess the way I think about it is this feels like AI maybe, right? So like, okay, AI is the quartz movement. So how do you adapt to it? Like, do you live with it, integrate into what you do, or you try to do a different perspective?
That's an interesting parallel. I never thought of it like that. It's like what about AI? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I guess like I'm trying to add everything. I think about like the AI is part of it. I mean, I'm not really like an AI nerd in any way, but what we do, of course, is very much into the topic of like data and like training and all this stuff. So inevitably, that topic is always there.
Totally. Awesome. Onur, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure. If people want to check out Countly, they can go to countly.com. That's countly.com. And if folks want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I guess, I'm happy to give my email directly, OAS. So that's my initials, OAS at count.ly. Right, so we actually got the countly.com domain later on. So our first domain was count.ly. So we still use that for emails. And also I'm on LinkedIn. I'm not super active on X. I mean, I'm not a social media person really for that sense. But yeah, I'm an email person still. So.
Yeah. It's like Cal Newport would be disappointed in you if you were spending too much time on social media, right?
Yeah. Yes.
All right. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure, and I wish you and the team the best of success.
Thank you very much, Amar. It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Cheers.